podcast today. A very special guest, 30-year veteran of professional wrestling, and he's a former WWE Hardcore European and Tag Team Champion, the one and only, the legend, Mr. Al Snow. Al, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. If I were any better, I'd be jealous of myself.
Cool. And the one thing I wanted to say, and it entertains me every day, is your Twitter jokes. I'm really enjoying them, and it always seems to put a smile on my face. So I can imagine you just have so much fun treating them out every day.
Yeah, thank you. I know they're silly and sometimes they're kind of goofy, but I figure there's so much negativity on the internet and on social media, especially that why not just put something out there to entertain people and maybe put a smile on people's faces and make them laugh for a second. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, I suppose we'll talk about online fans now before we jump into your career. But it's the one thing I hate about social media. There's things I do enjoy, like tweets you put out, and I enjoy seeing the good stuff. But the wrestling fan base these days, especially on social media, seems to be so negative, especially with WWE and such. And is that how you see things online?
Well, they are pretty negative, and that's not the fault of social media. That's the fault of the people that are using social media. It's just a tool. A hammer is a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to kill something. It's all in the usage of the tool as to its benefits or its detractions. And social media. The problem with social media is that it's given wrestling fans, I think I've said this once before, is that it's pulled back the curtain. The use of it is pulled back the curtain, and it's made wrestling fans more familiar with the goings-ons of behind the scenes more than ever before. And it's not that I don't subscribe to the old school, new school. I believe it's all the same school. I don't think the business has changed. I think it's evolved. I think it's developed. I think it's grown, but I don't think it's changed. We're still selling exactly the same thing that we were selling, 60 years ago. And that's still the who and the why. I think though that the more, I think one of the truest mantras besides misery loves company is that familiarity breeds contempt. And the reason that the wrestling fans are so contemptuous is that they have now become so familiar with something thanks to the access of social media and the wrestlers themselves inviting so many in backstage to the inner workings, and then giving them access to information, and people the very popular belief these days that because you have information, you somehow have real knowledge of a topic, which nothing could be further from the truth. You need to have information, and you have to have a commensurate amount of experience within that topic to couple together to have real knowledge, to really have an understanding, to really have a grasp of the information that you have. And, fans assume that just because they have all of this information nowadays, that they now have the same amount of knowledge and can then become contemptuous of the very thing that they used to love on a simplistic basis.
Yeah, that's well said. One of the side projects we do with this podcast, and it's the reason I started the podcast, we're working our way through 90s WWE pay-per-views, and we're just coming into 1993 now. And watching some of these shows, I remember watching them as a kid, and I always say to my fellow co-hosts, I miss these days watching wrestling, in full kayfabe, like had no idea of the inner workings and even the outer workings, I suppose you can say. And I think what you said is quite well, like a lot of fans think they know more than what they actually do, and it's spoiled the enjoyment for them. A lot of fans these days, I believe, are more interested in the ratings than the actual show.
Well, that ultimately is the responsibility of the wrestlers themselves, because the wrestling business is the wrestlers' business. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's not Vince's. It's not any promoters. It's not any writers. It's the wrestlers. They're 100% it's their business because it's 100% their responsibility. They're the be all end all. And, it's no different than if you were a magician and while you're sawing a woman in half on stage, you're turning around looking at the audience going, hey, don't worry, she's fine, she'll be okay. There's a woman up here, and then I got another girl down here below with her legs out the hole. It's and I'm just sawing the box. Well, then you've just ruined the enjoyment of why I came to watch you. But you can't prevent people from doing what they do. I mean, you can advise, and the old saying with advice is, if you're smart enough, I don't need to tell you, and if you're dumb enough, you're not going to listen. So,
yeah, well said. Cool. So we'll jump into your career. So one of the I know you've done the tryout with Ollie and Gene Anderson, which I heard was pretty brutal. Could you expand on that and like how tough Ollie and Gene was?
Sure. At the time that I broke into the wrestling business, there wasn't the proliferation of wrestling schools like there are now everywhere. And the access to the business was very closed. And for good reason. It made it, it was something that you really had to work to achieve. And then once you got it, if you got your foot in the door and actually were accepted into the business, into wrestling, then you had to, earn your way into the locker room. And you were subjected, to quite honestly, just physical and mental and emotional torture every night. They would try to see if they could crack you and, to make you earn your way in and earn their respect and earn their trust. And, because the wrestlers back in that day, they, all they did for a living was professional wrestling. They didn't work during the week and then, on the weekends just wrestle. That was their sole means of feeding their families. So they protected it fiercely. And, with that understanding, that now that I have it, back in the day when I first did it, I just thought that they were being sadistic, which they were. I mean, they were just being cruel and sadistic. But, the whole idea was because the knowledge of the fact that the wrestling business is predetermined has been in existence here in the United States since the 1920s, and it's been pretty well held in common knowledge that wrestling is predetermined, meaning that it's not real, not a real competitive situation, but to keep that mystery, to keep that air and that question, they Ole and Gene took it, they made sure that if you didn't make it in, which one guy out of about 30 or 35 guys even, remotely had a chance, that day. If you did make it in, then, if you didn't make it in, then you were going to leave and you were going to know just physically how hard and it was in the wrestling business. And you were going to go out and tell the tale of just what you had to go through that day just to get in, let alone what you had to do to survive, to be in it, and, it was an experience. I think we started out with, at the Charlotte Coliseum that Sunday, we started out with maybe 30 or 35 guys that wanted to try out, all different sizes, all different shapes and different ages. And we went out, we ran 5 miles around the old back parking lot of the Charlotte Coliseum. And we came in and we were joined by Ole, and he had like 5 trainees, I think, at that time. I think the smallest guy was about my size now. I'm about 240 now. So, and he, we did 500 free squats, and then we went and then ran the stairs of the Coliseum, up and then down and then over and then up and then down and then over and then up, all the way around the Coliseum. By the time, you're doing that, your legs are shaking and, you can barely stand. And, we got down to the bottom and we did 400 push-ups, and it didn't matter how you did them. You had to get them accomplished. Ole was in the ring with his 5 trainees, and he was working, and he'd bring in each tryout person to let the trainees try different hooks and wrestling moves on the guys that were trying out. And if it wasn't your turn to go in, you had to put somebody on your back and run down the length of the Coliseum and then back and then switch and then back and forth. And if it still wasn't your turn, then you stood there and you did jumping jacks. Lots of guys quit during just that portion of the tryout. You'd see guys drop out on the run. You'd see guys drop out on the squats. You'd see guys drop out on the stairs. You'd see guys drop out on the push-ups. They just would give up. And then when it was your turn, you got in the ring and you got down in the amateur position. You got down on all fours. And then Ole when I got in, he was teaching them how to belly out a guy, put him on his belly, grapevine the leg, and rear chin lock him. And somehow, still don't know to this day, but I got past 4 of the guys. I get the biggest guy. He's the last guy. He's probably 270, 280, just jacked, just. And he gets me down, and somehow I get back to all fours and almost get away. And Ellie's like, do it again. So he gets me down again. And this time I can't quite get away, but I'm still struggling. And I think the only reason I was struggling is because I was in shock or whatever. I don't know. And unfortunately, Ole was the only one Gene was the only one that was there when I first arrived. So when they passed out the releases, I signed Gene's name in there. And so Ole had been, you go through all 5 of these guys, and then Ole would get in there with you and rough you up and basically, stretch you. And since I had signed Gene's name, Gene got in with me. And Gene wasn't a hooker like Ole. And but he was nasty. And he immediately started pulling my hair, fish hooking my mouth, raking my eyes. He was just vicious. And we went at each other, and he tried to grab my testicles. I grabbed his. We were rolling around on the mat. Later that night in the hotel room, I looked in the mirror. He had bit me all over my back. And I had bite marks all over my back. I didn't realize it. And he finally rolled me on my back and stuck a thumb in my eye and was screaming, threatening that he was going to poke my eye out and pop my eyeball out. And Ole was now the man of common sense and decorum and calmed everything down. And, I had a broken nose and bleeding everywhere. And Gene kicked me in the ass, told me to get out of his ring. And I went back to the dressing room, cleaned up, and came back out and shook his hand and asked him what time the show was that night, and came back that night and watched the show, and then came back home, and then got in contact with Jim Lancaster, who I'd spoken to before to turn me down, but he had a change of heart, and begun the process of training with him. So.
And it's safe to say you're a very tough guy, and for the next few years he was working the independents of the territories still during these days. And one of the big matches I noticed, and I've been working my way through ECW in 1995 on the network, and that's your match against Benoit. And I know for a lot of people it's tough to talk about Benoit, obviously, with what happened, but if we can travel back to this time and this match itself, I mean, what a match. I watched it again last night, and hell of a match, and you're doing springboard missile drop kicks and the chain wrestling between you two. So I know, like I said, it's tough to talk about Benoit and praise him, but if we can put that to the side, how talented was he in the ring, and how much did you enjoy wrestling this match?
I loved wrestling with Benoit. From the very first time that we did, it was easy. You have certain people you have a chemistry with and you can dance with, and him being so aggressive made it so much easier for me to be aggressive back. And I didn't have to worry that, he wasn't going to know what to do, or, in wrestling, one guy is just like dancing. One guy leads, meaning that, usually it's the heel, the bad guy. And that's because they can dictate the pace. They can, the baby face or the good guy fights back, and the heel or the bad guy decides how much that he lets him do it, how far he gets to go before he shuts him back down. Um, because heat. It's it's what we call the heat. Heat's not offense. Heat's not moves. Heat's a want. It's a need. It's a game that you used to play as a kid when you'd take a pen or you'd take a lollipop and you'd hold it in front of your friend. You'd, hey, you want this? You want this? And they'd go, yeah, and they go to reach for it and you yank it away.
Yeah.
And that gets heat. It gets the want, the need, and the frustration builds. And that's what you do in wrestling psychologically is you create that want, you create that need. The babyface tries to give it, and the heel takes it away. He decides ultimately when he's going to let that heat get paid off. And with Benoit, it was easy because he understood that, and he would lead, and you could just simply do what you did, which was fight back, and he would then dictate when he shut you down, how much he shut you down, and etc. So it was really simple, and I loved every opportunity I had to work with him because it allowed making for a more realistic match. Steve Regal, Benoit, Fit Finley, guys like even Bob Holly. When I've had a opportunity to work with those guys, it's so easy. It's a night off because you just have to be in the moment. You don't have to. You just react and you feel it, and it's such a joy to be able to do that and to make it look and feel as real as possible.
And after this short run VCW, you made your way towards Smoky Mountain, and the one and only Jim Cornette. I listen to his show every weekend, find him so entertaining. And obviously, there seems to be a lot of beef between him and AEW at the minute. And I mean, a lot of things he says, I agree with him. Some things perhaps disagree, but a lot of things I agree with. But a lot of the AEW fan base has got a hate for Jim Cornette. So if he was in AEW's position, and I truly believe they should, if he was running AEW, would you go all out to bring Jim Cornette to the company? Because the amount of heat he would get from the fans would be unreal. So would that be something you would be doing?
I don't know. I mean, you've got to understand that as a wrestling company, think of it like this, okay? Running a wrestling company is the same as making a comic book movie. Why do I say that? Because you're making a product that you have a fan base that already knows the character and knows their strengths, their weaknesses, knows their wants, their needs, their hopes, their dreams, their desires. They know all of the story. But there's an even broader, bigger audience that doesn't know any of that because they don't read comic books.
Right.
So do we just make a comic book movie that only appeals to the comic book fans?
No.
And then we spend millions, literally millions of dollars producing this movie? Or do we try our best to make one that now bridges the gap and then appeals to both sections so that we can have a successful product? We can make a profit and make it as profitable as possible. And your idea is great, but how many people in that broader audience know that Jim Cornette is so hated by this fan base, and what would it serve that broader audience? And is there a way to bring Jim Cornette in to where now you can educate that broader audience once he arrives to where now they join in that hate of Jim Cornette as well? Or are you now just simply pandering to that small portion of the audience?
Yeah, it's well said, and it would be interesting if he did turn up.
It would be great. They did the same thing in the ECW at one point, with Cornette coming in there, and it was short-lived. I mean, it was a very short run, but for that small percentage of the audience, it was awesome. Just absolutely awesome. And I'm sure there's a way that you could have Jim come in and be an on-air character, and again, much like what they do with comic book movies, bridge that gap to where an audience that's never read a comic book or never read that particular comic book about that particular character can come in, sit down, and get engrossed in the movie and care enough to think, my God, that was a really good film, and I got my money's worth for paying to see it.
Yeah. And eventually, after Smoky Mountain, you made your way towards WWE, and you was given the gimmicks Avatar and Shinobi. And eventually, they paired you up with Marty Jannetty as the New Rockers. Whose idea was it for that tag team to be formed?
Bruce Pritchard was the one who came up, presented that idea, and and I was, very fortunate to be a part of it and to be with Marty. I think I've said this numerous times. I don't think that Marty gets the praise or the respect that he deserves. I think that he is far more talented and far more a better worker than people imagine. And I think that, I understand because the new Rockers didn't do as well, because I think Marty saw it, and quite understandably saw it as maybe a little bit of a knock, and that it was going to hurt what he and Sean had accomplished and had done. And I don't think his heart was quite into it. And, as such, it never quite truly got over, and my head was in the wrong place too. I wasn't out there trying to be an attraction, being the best attraction I could be. I wasn't out there trying to be a star. I was out there trying to be the best wrestler. And that's not what it's about. It's about trying to motivate people to want to pay to see you, to want to be you. And we went about it the wrong way. So it had its run, and I was very fortunate to have that time with Marty and learned a lot, and better for it.
Yeah. And after this run, you wrestled as an enhancement time, but you made your way back towards ECW. We'll talk about your second run in ECW, but before we do talk about that, I suppose it coincided with you going back to ECW and the Montreal Screwjob happened. What was your thoughts when that incident happened, and could you believe that it actually happened?
Well, I felt betrayed. I felt that there's a covenant between the promoter and the wrestler, and from one side of it, I understand and see Vince's, viewpoint, because he didn't want, Brett, he didn't want to risk Brett taking the title away and doing the same thing as what Medusa had just recently done, which was throw her women's title in the trash. And, so I can understand that, because that's a representation of the company. And, and I can also see Brett's side of it. I mean, the rumor or the scuttlebutt in the locker room was that Sean had told Brett, if they come and ask me, I wouldn't put you over. So, and to put somebody over or to lose is not called doing the job. It just fascinates me how people have no idea what these real terms actually mean. Losing was called doing the favor. And the reason it was called doing the favor is it's expected to be returned. And you are doing a favor for the person, because you're putting yourself down to bring them up a little bit higher. And, when you have somebody that comes and tells you that they wouldn't do the favor for you, well, then it puts you in that position to where you're like, well, screw you. I'm not going to do it for you then, And so if that's the truth, then I can't blame Brett for being, reticent in wanting to, do the favor for Sean on the way out. And there were other alternatives, I guess, but, at the time, I'm sure it's easy to judge when you're not in that position. But, I'm sure Vince felt that he needed to, at that time, put the title on Sean, and he needed to get it off Brett before Brett left the company, and that meant Brett needed to put Sean over in Montreal, and so Vince was going to make sure that happened.
And you made your second run in ECW, and the origins of the head gimmick. How did it come about?
I was trying different ways to get myself over, and I was trying different ways to show that I had had a nervous breakdown, and nothing was quite catching on. People didn't understand it, and from picking at my clothes to talking to myself, which just looked like I was talking to the other wrestler, and I was reading books on abnormal psychology, and read a book about a case study about a woman who had paranoid schizophrenia with what they termed as transference, meaning she transferred the illness onto the inanimate objects that were talking to her. So she thought they were crazy, not her. So, I was one night after I'd wrestled the great Sasuke in the arena. We were taking pictures for the Japanese magazine, and we were over on the side of the building where they make the Mumber Day parade floats. And I found a styrofoam head, and I just thought, I'm going to start carrying this to the ring, and I'm going to talk to it like a real person, and I'm going to act like it's crazy. I'm not. And then it just started taking off from there. And Mikey Whipwreck and Spike Dudley found the beautician's mannequin head in the barrel that fans would bring weapons for New Jack to use every night in New Britain, Connecticut, and they found it and brought it to me because they knew that I needed one with a face, real face and hair.
Yeah.
So I wrote "Help Me" on their forehead, and I wrote "Help Me" on my own, and with the idea that while I was in this weird state of insanity, that I would write "Help Me" on my own forehead, which I never acknowledged, which was an inner cry for help, and that the head wrote "Help Me" on its forehead like I kidnapped it and was, trying to get away from me. And that was the relationship dynamic between the two.
And one of the things what was a highlight every time was your entrance. The theme song by The Prodigy, Breathe, which I absolutely love that song anyway, but your entrances and the fan interaction, I actually just posted a clip on their Twitter just about an hour ago, and the entrance with all the fans having their heads in the audience. How much fun and how special was these moments for you, and how over you was with the fans? And it looked like it was just such a fun time to be a wrestler.
Oh, it was amazing. It's indescribable. Typically when you go out there, whether there's 2 or 2,000 or 20,000 or 200,000, and nothing makes you feel more alive than to walk out there in front of those fans, and then to be in that position where the minute that your music hits, the place erupts, and the energy and the interaction between them was amazing. And I owe all of that to the fact that people legitimately believed in who I was. They believed that I was really insane, and that I really thought that the head spoke to me, and and it was it was fantastic. It really was just incredible. I can't, I wish I could describe really just how absolutely incredible it was. It was just beyond words.
And I suppose your biggest match in this run was against Shane Douglas for the ECW title at WrestlePalooza. Um, a lot of fans believe you should have won it because you were so over. Was there any talks of you actually winning the belt, or was the plan always for Shane to retain his title?
I don't know. I don't know if there were any talks of me actually winning the belt or not. That Paul never spoke to me about that, because at the same time, because I was only on loan from WWF, because I tried to quit WWF, sent in my request for my release, and they rolled over my contract to a third year. So I was basically put there on loan just to give me something to do till my contract ran out. And, nobody knew of the relationship between Paul and Vince at that time. Looking back, now it all makes sense. But, I was just put there on loan. And then when I again resubmitted my request for my release at the end of that time frame with ECW, Vince Russo reached out to me and, asked me about coming back, and I just told him straight up no. I was happy where I was at. And then, but then when I was in Florida at Jerry Lynn's house, and I watched the new opening of the show, and Paul, I've heard Paul in interviews, poo-poo this idea, but any fan can watch, and if there's, the opening of the show, you put your biggest stars, the ones you had plans to build around. And people can say what they want, but I was truly, truly, truly over I
Oh
was the
yeah,
most over guy. I was the most over guy in that company at that time, I think.
yeah,
It was me and Sandman were neck and neck. And, you know, and when I saw I was nowhere to be seen, I thought, well, that tells me my future here. So, I reached back out to Vince Russo and, sent a tape of the stuff I'd been doing. And then I had, this was all prior to the pay-per-view, and made a deal to go back to WWE. And, and that might have dictated Paul, but, a lot of people have said in regards to that they expected and wanted me to win and thought it was the right thing business-wise to do, which was to let me win. And that because I didn't, it really disappointed them to the point where they didn't want to watch it anymore. I know Terry Taylor told me that and
yeah.
thought it was a big mistake. And Shane dropped the belt the week later at TV to Taz. I could have won the belt and just dropped it to Taz a week later. But Paul, thought that it would be better to swerve everybody in his words, which is what he told me, where everybody's expecting me to win and then not. So, I don't know business wise, because then if I, of course, I'm going to say I should have. And then if I say that, then people are going to say, well, of course I was going to think he should have won. Of course, he's putting himself over. No,
But
I
you
just
should
think
have.
I think from a business standpoint, I really think I should have. It would have been better
Yeah,
business to have,
yeah,
have me hold it, win, and then I could have just dropped it at the next TV or whatever. So,
definitely. And I mean, we'll stick a pin on your in-ring career, and hopefully we'll be doing a part two to talk about your WWE run. But before we do so, I really do want to promote OVW and the great stuff
sure.
you've been in. And I recently, I interviewed him just before Christmas. Lucius Lawrence, he's
Oh, yeah.
he's he's my guy for OVW. He really is, and he's a great guy to talk to. And
Awesome.
tell everyone about OVW and the great talent, Lawrence, Tony Vizo, the Tate twins, so many to name. Jesse Goddess, who's outstanding as a champion and doing some great stuff for OVW. So tell everyone about it.
I bought OVW from Danny Davis, the owner and founder, probably about 3 years ago, and um, tried to resurrect it. It's never stopped running. It's been in
Mm,
business over 30 years. We're the longest running consecutive episodic locally produced television show in the history of television, I think.
wow.
We're at 1,100, and I think this week will be 43 or 44
Yeah.
episodes consecutively, and which is an incredible accomplishment in itself. And uh, I started trying to rebuild it, and we have an incredible talent roster now. I'm trying to create a major league feel on a regional level, which allows new wrestlers to come in and learn who they are, get their experience, their polish. We're the only place outside of WWE and AEW that produce a live weekly television show every week.
Yeah.
So that for a performer is an incredible opportunity to get experience before they get thrown in the deep end of the pool on WWE or AEW. And we still run live events. This June, July, and on into August, we have been doing uh, anywhere from 3 to 4 live events, including television, every single week. So if you were down here wrestling for us, you were wrestling anywhere from 4 to 5 nights a week, consistently every single week. And it's an incredible opportunity for these guys to get that polish and learn what works for them and why it works for them, so that if they get an opportunity with one of the major platforms, they can take the full advantage of that opportunity and run with it as much as possible. They're not walking into that blind. We're the only wrestling training school in the world that we have been accredited by the State Office of Proprietary Education as an actual trade school for professional wrestling. We're working on getting our federal accreditation right now. And once we do that, then we'll be able to, no different than a college or a trade school, or university will be able to use student loans and student financing for people to attend. And we don't just train on the trade school. We don't just train just in the ring skills. We also train on how to operate cameras, lighting, sound, production, producing, directing, editing. So because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when these young kids, their careers are going to come to an end in the ring, and that gives them skills to still have a career within wrestling. So I want to build something that gives the next generation an opportunity to get the skills and give them the best possible chance of success in wrestling, and at the same time build a platform that for wrestlers that have been like in other companies, a place to come and reinvent themselves. And we have national television access. We're in about 150 million homes around the country here in the United States. We're on Sky Sports in UK, and we're on Sports International in Europe. And and we're just growing and reaching more and more of a fan base every day. And and I'm trying to, in ring wise, take it back, psychologically, not physically. I don't care what they do physically. I just care that they do it within the context of trying to win and not lose, and sell you, the audience, who they are and why they're doing it. Because I think that's what's missing in everywhere else, is that the talent now try to sell you what they do, and they don't try to sell you who and why. And back in the day, part of the success of the Attitude Era was because every guy on that show, from top to bottom, you could describe to your friends, like, hey, you got to watch wrestling. There's this guy, he's A, B, C, D, E. There's this other guy, he's A, B, C, D. There's this girl, and you could describe everyone on that show. And nowadays, no matter how amazingly athletic these people are, you can't describe them to anybody that's not a fan.
That's true.
And that's the thing that you relate to. Because you don't relate to what we physically do. You relate to who we are and why we're doing it. And that's what we center on as far as the psychology here in the ring, is that we center more on the who and the why. We're on Fight TV every week from 7 to 9. And you can get that all over the world, 7 to 9 Eastern time. And we're again on all the national networks that we have and the international networks as well every week. And if anybody wants any information, they can go to ovwrestling.com or aswa.live, which is the Al Snow Wrestling Academy. And I even have affiliate schools, one in the Midlands there in the UK and one in Surrey outside England, that are affiliate schools, one in Romania. Did have one in Denmark and in Hungary, but I think the COVID thing kind of hurt them. And then 2 in South America and 1 in Greece. So
and you mentioned about characters, and I will put them over one more time. Luscious Lawrence and
Luscious Lawrence,
when I found OVW again, and like he stood out to me straight away, and this is what I said to him. I said, "You're ravishing Rick Rude, a throwback but with a twist," and such a strong character, and the current storyline with Haley J now, I'm loving it, and that's what I miss, like these larger than life. Because to me, when I'm watching him, he's a larger than life character, and like you said, really well before, and a lot of the wrestlers these days, mega talented, and what they can do, what they've done in the ring is a step up. But like you said, they all look the same basically, and you need them standout people. And for me, Luscious Lawrence is definitely one of them.
That's awesome. Yeah, and he's a great guy. He really is. So, he works really hard, and I'm really glad that he's having the success that he's having. So, and the story with Haley and Bizzo and Luscious is turning out to be a lot of fun.
It is. Awesome. Well, Al, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish we had more time. Hopefully we could do this again, a part 2, and
Absolutely.
talk about the Attitude Era run. But before we do sign off, tell everyone where they can find you and promote Collar and Elbow as well.
Oh, sure. You can find me at The Real Al Snow on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I put up lots of goofy jokes, and that's, things like that. You can Collar and Elbow. If you're in the UK, you can go to Wrestle Merch Central. They are an officially licensed marketer for Collar and Elbow, or you can go to collarandelbowbrand.com and check out all the designs there as well. And I have a comic book coming out. It's the Ballad of Al Snow and Head, and it's at Broken Icon Comics. So if you look them up, it's brokeniconcomics.com. And I wrote my book. It's at Amazon. It's called Self-Help: The Life Lessons from the Bizarre Career of Al Snow, and you can check that out as well. So
I'll definitely look for that. I didn't know you had a book out, so I'm definitely gonna purchase that.
Well, good. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. But you can, like I said, you can go to Wrestle Merch Central. Because of the shipping, it's so expensive to ship to the UK. We work in partnership with Wrestle Merch and open up a store there for Collar and Elbow as well. So you can get the designs there.
Awesome. Well, like I said, Mr. Snow, absolute pleasure. And yeah, hopefully we'll be doing this again one day.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm sure we can. We can try and see if we can work something out for next week.